Chapter 3. Naruto had just walked onto the porch of the big house to see Grover hand Percy a cup and watched him literally chug the whole thing. "How do you feel, Percy?" he heard Grover ask. "Like I could throw Nancy Bobof at 100 yards, was Percy's reply. "That's good," Grover said. "I don't think you could drink any more of that anyway." "What do you mean?" Percy asked him. "Well, what he means, Percy," Naruto began, causing them to jump and spin towards him, "is that is nectar, the drink of the gods. Any mortal who drinks it literally burns up from the inside out. But demigods like you and me can have small amounts, like a cup full, to heal us of injuries. Any more though, and it will affect us just like any other mortal," he explained, causing Percy to look at him strangely and Grover to sigh. "What do you mean, drink of the gods?" Percy asked, confused. "Come on, Chiron and Mr. D are waiting," Grover said, taking Percy's empty cup and setting it down on an empty table. Grover led them into the house and then into the living room. "Mr. Brunner," was Percy's ecstatic reply when he noticed him. "Oh, Percy and Naruto, good," Mr. Brunner said. "Now we have 4 for Pinnacle," he added as he motioned them to the 2 empty chairs. "Now then, Percy, this is Mr. D. He is the camp director," Mr. Brunner said, pointing to the man opposite of him. Mr. D looked at Percy with bloodshot eyes and heaved a great sigh. "Oh, I suppose I must say it. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. There, now don't expect me to be glad to see you," he said grouchily. Thanks," Percy said as he scooted away from Mr. D. He knew what a man looked like when he was hitting the happy juice from his time with his stepfather. If Mr. D was a stranger to alcohol, then he was a satyr. "Annabeth," Mr. Brunner called, and she stepped forward. "This young lady nursed you back to health, Percy. Annabeth, could you go check on Percy's bunk in cabin 11 for me?" Mr. Brunner told Percy, then asked Annabeth. "Sure, Chiron," Annabeth said. Naruto then watched as Percy and Annabeth looked at each other for a moment and smirked. "You drool in your sleep," Annabeth finally said, causing Naruto to crack up laughing as she left. "What about you, Naruto? What are you doing here?" Percy asked angrily when Naruto finally calmed down. "Like I told you the other day, Percy, some things came up and I had to go back to the orphanage to get all my stuff together. It was to make sure I got here when you did," Naruto explained, causing Percy to look at him in shock for a moment. Then he turned back to Mr. Brunner. "So, you work her, Mr. Brunner?" Percy asked him. "Not Mr. Brunner," Chiron said. "I'm afraid that was a pseudonym." "You may call me Chiron," he told Percy. "Okay," Percy said, totally confused. "And Mr. D. Does that stand for something?" he asked. Everyone stopped and stared at him for a moment. "On that happy note, Chiron, I'm going to go wait outside, as I know most of what you're going to talk to Percy about," Naruto said, receiving a nod from Chiron as he got up and left. A few moments later, Naruto saw Chiron walk out in his full form with Percy behind him. Naruto, come along, there are a few more places you should see in camp that you weren't shown yesterday," Chiron said when he noticed him. Naruto nodded and followed him and Percy off the porch. As they walked, they passed the volleyball pit. Several of the campers nudged each other, and one pointed at the minotaur horn in Percy's hand and spoke. "It's them," Naruto snorted in amusement at them, but saw Percy was feeling rather nervous at all their stares. "Don't worry about them, Percy," Naruto said, placing his hand on Percy's shoulder. Percy relaxed a little and smiled at Naruto gratefully. Naruto saw Percy look back towards the big house and then turn towards Chiron. "What's up there?" Percy asked, pointing to the top front window. "Just the attic," Chiron said, his smile fading as he looked where Percy was pointing. "Somebody lives there?" Percy asked him. "No, not one living thing," Chiron said with finality. "Nothing living, huh?" Naruto thought to himself. "Come along, you two, there's still lots to see," Chiron said, his light-hearted tone coming out a little forced. They walked through the camp's strawberry fields, watching campers collect them while satyrs were here or they're playing their reed pipes. Chiron told them that they used the strawberry fields to pay for the camp's expenses through export to businesses in New York and on Mount Olympus. He also told them that it took no effort to grow them, as Mr. D had the effect of making fruit-bearing plants grow like crazy. "Grover won't get into too much trouble, will he?" Percy asked Chiron. "I mean, he was a good protector, really," he added after a moment. Chiron sighed and shed his tweed jacket, draping it of his horseback like a saddle. "Grover has big dreams, Percy. Perhaps bigger than reasonable. To reach his goal, he must first prove great courage by succeeding as a keeper, finding a camper and bringing him safely to Half-Blood Hill." "But he did that," Percy shouted. "I might agree with you," Chiron said. "But it is not my place to judge. Dionysus and the Council of Cloven Elders must decide. I'm afraid they may not see this assignment as a success. After all, Grover lost you in New York. Then there's the unfortunate fate of your mother. Also the fact that Grover was unconscious when you dragged him over the property line, and Naruto was the one to kill the Minotaur. The council might question whether this shows any courage on Grover's part." Naruto could tell that Percy wanted to protest, and that he felt guilty about giving Grover the slip. "He'll get a second chance, won't he?" Percy asked hopefully. Chiron winced. "I'm afraid that was Grover's second chance, Percy." The council was not anxious to give him another either, after what happened the first time 5 years ago. "Olympus knows, I advised him to wait longer before trying again. He is still so small for his age." "How old is he?" Naruto asked, entering the conversation. "Oh, 28. Chiron answered. "What? And he's in 6th grade?" Percy asked unbelievingly. "Satyrs mature half as fast as humans, Percy, Naruto. Grover has been the equivalent of a middle school student for the past 6 years," Chiron explained. "Well, that's interesting," Naruto mumbled. "That's horrible," Percy said, imagining having to be in the same grade for that long. "Quite," Chiron agreed. "At any rate, Grover is a late bloomer, even by satyr standards, and not yet very accomplished at woodland magic." Alas, he was anxious to pursue his dream. Perhaps now he will find some other career. "That's not fair," Percy said. "What happened the first time? Was it really so bad?" Chiron looked away quickly. Naruto saw a sad look on his face and noticed he was looking at the tree on the boundary line. "Let's move along, shall we?" Chiron said, walking ahead with them following. "Chiron," Percy said. If the gods and Olympus and all that are real. Yes, child? Chiron asked, looking at him. Does that mean the underworld is real, too? Percy asked him. Chiron's expression darkened. Yes, child, he paused, as if choosing his words carefully. There is a place where spirits go after death. But for now, until we know more, I would urge you to put that out of your mind. What do you mean, until we know more? Percy asked. Come, Percy, Naruto, let's see the woods. Chiron said as if he didn't hear him. As they got closer, Percy and Naruto noticed how huge the forest was. It looked ancient, and took up at least a quarter of the valley they were in. It had tall, thick trees that were close together, and looked like no one had been inside since the Native Americans. The woods are stocked, if you care to try your luck. But go armed. Chiron said. Stocked with what? Percy asked. Armed with what? You'll see. Capture the flag is Friday night. Do you have your own sword and shield? Chiron said, then asked them both. I don't use shields, but I do have my own sword, and my own bow and arrow. Naruto said, pointing to his necklace, then pulling out his Zippo. Chiron nodded, then turned to Percy. My own what? Percy asked, shocked. No. Chiron said. I don't suppose you do. I think a size 5 will do. I'll visit the armory later. Chiron said thoughtfully. Chiron turned around to continue the tour when Naruto spoke up. Chiron, I have already seen the rest yesterday. I'll be at the cabins when you get done. Naruto said, receiving a nod from Chiron as he walked off after patting Percy on the shoulder once more. An hour later, Percy and Chiron walked into the center of the cabins and saw that Naruto and Annabeth were having a discussion over the books they were holding in front of the 11th cabin. As they reached them, they turned around, and Annabeth looked Percy over critically. Naruto smirked as he noticed it. Annabeth, Chiron said. I have master's archery class at noon. Take Percy from here. Yes, sir, Annabeth said. Cabin 11, Chiron told Percy, gesturing towards the doorway of the cabin. Make yourself at home, he then left them. Well, Percy, let's go introduce you to your cabin mates. Seeing as Naruto meet them yesterday, Annabeth said as she turned towards the door of the cabin. They look inside of the cabin. Out of all the cabins, it looked the most like a regular old summer camp cabin, with emphasis on the old. The threshold was worn down, and the brown paint was peeling. Over the doorway was one of those doctor's symbols, a winged pole with 2 snakes wrapped around it. Inside, it was packed with people. Both boys and girls, way more people than there were bunk beds. Sleeping bags spread all over on the floor. It looked like a gym where the Red Cross had set up an evacuation center. Percy stood in the doorway beside Naruto, watching as he waved at a few of them who waved back. But most of them were staring at him. Well, Annabeth said, go on. Percy entered into the cabin and tripped, coming in the door, making a total fool of himself. Good impression, Percy. Naruto said cheekily, getting a few snickers from the campers. He and Annabeth then walked inside. Percy Jackson, meet cabin 11. Annabeth said. Regular or undetermined? Somebody asked. He is undetermined, just like me, guys. Naruto said, and everybody groaned. A guy who looked around 19 with sandy blonde hair and mischievous eyes stepped forward. Now, guys. That's what we're here for. Welcome, Percy. You can have that spot on the floor right over there. Next to where Naruto's is, he said with a kind smile, though it was kind of marred a little by the scar that ran from his right eye all the way down to his jaw. This is Luke, Annabeth said, and her voice sounded different somehow. Naruto just smirked, noticing her blush, while Percy glanced at her. She noticed them looking at her, and her expression hardened again. He's your counselor for now. For now? Percy asked, confused. You're undetermined, Luke explained patiently. They don't know what cabin to put you two in, so you're here. Cabin 11 takes all newcomers, all visitors. Naturally, we would. Hermes, our patron, is the god of travelers. Naruto noticed Percy look at his spot on the floor, then the minotaur horn in his hand, then shake his head a little. Naruto guessed he was going to mark his spot with it, but then remembered that Hermes was also the god of thieves. How long will I be here? Percy asked. Good question, Luke said. Until you're determined. How long will that take? Percy asked. All the campers laughed. It could take a long time, Percy. Naruto said, smirking at him. Come on, Annabeth told Percy. I still need to tell you about the rest of the cabins. Alright, I'm coming. Percy said with Naruto following them. Once they were outside and a few feet away, Annabeth turned to Percy. Jackson, you have to do better than that. She said. What? Percy asked, causing Naruto to shake his head at him. Annabeth rolled her eyes and mumbled under her breath. I can't believe I thought you were the one. What's your problem? Percy asked in an angry tone. All I know is, I fought some bull guy and one more thing, and it was Naruto that killed him. Don't talk like that, Annabeth said. Do you know how many kids at this camp wish they had your chance? To get killed? Percy asked, still angry. To fight the Minotaur. What do you think we train for? She asked him sarcastically. Percy shook his head. Look, if the thing I fought really was the Minotaur, the same one in the stories. Yes, she said. Then there's only one. Percy said. Yes, Annabeth said. And he died, like, a gazillion years ago, right? Theseus killed him in the labyrinth. So? Percy said. Monsters don't die, Percy. They can be killed, but they don't die, Naruto said, finally speaking, causing Percy to look at him. They don't have souls. You can dispel them for a while, maybe a whole lifetime if you're lucky. But they are primal forces, archetypes. Eventually they reform. What? Percy said, disbelief coloring his voice. The fur. I mean your math teacher, she is still out there. Annabeth said, causing Naruto to look at her with a raised eyebrow, wondering how she knew about that, while Percy looked at her in shock. How did you know about Mrs. Dodds? Percy asked. You talk in your sleep. Annabeth said, causing Naruto to snicker. You almost called her something. A fury? They're Hades torturers, right? Annabeth glanced at the ground nervously, as if she expected it to open up and swallow her. You shouldn't call them by name, even here. We call them the kindly ones, if we have to speak of them at all. Look, is there anything we can say without it thundering? Percy asked. And why do I have to stay in cabin 11 anyway? Why is everybody so crowded together? There are plenty of empty bunks right over there. Percy fired off, then pointed at the first few cabins. Go ahead and try to use them, Percy. I guarantee you won't make it through the doors of any of them, Naruto said seriously while Annabeth turned pale at his question. What he means is you don't just choose a cabin, Percy. It depends on who your parents are, or your parent, Annabeth said. My mom is Sally Jackson, Percy said. She works at the candy store in Grand Central Station. At least, she used to. I'm sorry about your mom, Percy. But that's not what I mean. I'm talking about your other parent. Your dad, Annabeth said. He's dead, I never knew him, Percy said. Your father's not dead, Percy, Naruto said. Percy looked confused. What do you mean, Naruto? Your father is a god, Naruto said. What? Percy asked in shock. How else would you be allowed here? You are a demigod, Percy, Naruto said. How do I know I am a demigod, as they are called? Percy asked. Usually, demigods are diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD, Annabeth said. How does dyslexia and ADHD help? Percy asked. Well, for one, Percy, the reason why we have dyslexia is because as the child of a god or goddess, our brains are programmed to read ancient Greek and Latin, Naruto said. And the ADHD, how does it help? Percy asked them. ADHD is your battlefield reflexes. In a real fight, they'd keep you alive. As for the attention problems, that's because you see too much, Percy, not too little. Your senses are better than a regular mortal's. Then there is, Annabeth said. She wanted to say more but was interrupted by someone very familiar to her and Naruto, which caused Naruto to shake his head. He just knew Percy was going to say something stupid to her, with his habit of speaking without thinking first. Well, a newbie, the familiar voice said. They looked towards the voice's direction. They saw Clarisse with two of her siblings. Clarisse, Annabeth sighed. Why don't you go polish your spear or something? She asked sarcastically. Sure, Miss Princess. So I can run you through with it Friday night, Clarisse said. Vera es Caracas, Annabeth said, which in Greek was go to the crows. You don't stand a chance. Well, pulverize you, Clarisse said, but her eye twitched. Perhaps she wasn't sure she could follow through on the threat. She turned towards Naruto. Hello, Clarisse, how's Silena? Naruto asked her while smirking. Hello, Naruto, she's good. She's hanging out with some of her siblings right now, Clarisse said in a neutral tone. She turned to Percy. Who's this little runt with you? She asked. Percy Jackson, Naruto said. Meet Clarisse, daughter of Ares. Percy blinked. Like the war god? He asked. Clarisse sneered. You got a problem with that? She asked. No, Percy said, recovering his wits. It explains the bad smell, he said, causing Naruto to facepalm at his words. We have an initiation ceremony for newbies, Percy. Clarisse growled out. Percy. He corrected. Whatever. Come on, I'll show you. Clarisse said. Clarisse. Annabeth tried to say. Stay out of this, wise girl. Clarisse said. Before Percy could do anything, Clarisse grabbed him in a headlock and started dragging him towards the bathroom. He dropped his minotaur horn in the process, and Annabeth grabbed it up for him. She then turned to Naruto, about to say something before he interrupted. Don't ask, I'm not going to stop this. Percy needs to understand that he can't always say the first thing that comes out of his mouth. And that he needs to think before he speaks. Naruto said, earning a nod from Annabeth. Percy was kicking and punching, but to no avail. Clarisse had a grip like iron. She dragged him into the girls' bathroom. There was a line of toilet stalls on one side and shower stalls on the other. It smelled just like any other public bathroom. Clarisse's friends were laughing. Percy had tried to find the strength he had used when he fought the Minotaur. But it just wasn't there. Like he's big 3 material. Clarisse said as she pushed him towards one of the toilets. Yeah, right. The Minotaur probably fell over laughing, because of how stupid looking he was. One of her friends snickered out. Naruto and Annabeth stood in the doorway of the bathroom watching. Naruto kept his hand on Annabeth's shoulder to keep her from interfering. Clarisse and her friends forced Percy to his knees, and Clarisse began to push his head towards the toilet. Percy began to struggle like crazy. They heard the plumbing rumble and saw the pipes shudder. Clarisse's friends backed up and her grip loosened on Percy's hair. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he saw the water begin to move, and he grabbed Annabeth before diving out of the bathroom door. At that exact moment, Clarisse and her friends were blasted out of the bathroom by a huge torrent of water before it suddenly stopped. Percy walked out of the bathroom to see Clarisse and her friends spread out on the ground dripping wet, and saw Naruto helping Annabeth up from the ground. You're dead, new boy. You are totally dead. Clarisse said with a look of absolute hatred on her face. You want to? Percy began before Naruto covered his mouth with his hand. Shut up, Percy, you have a big mouth, Naruto said. And if you keep using it without thinking, you'll end up getting yourself killed. He added, causing Percy to look away for a moment. He then looked towards Clarisse. Clarisse, Naruto called. She looked towards him. Go get yourself cleaned up in your cabin. We don't need another mess right now. Clarisse nodded, and she and her friends took off to their cabin. He then removed his hand from Percy's mouth. What? Percy snapped, noticing Annabeth staring at him. How did you do that? Annabeth asked him. I don't know. Percy told her truthfully. What are you thinking, Annabeth? Naruto asked her, noticing her thoughtful look. I'm thinking that I want both of you on my team for Capture the Flag, Annabeth said. Naruto had grinned at her words. Alright then, well, I have something I need to do, and you need to show Percy the rest of the camp, Naruto said as he began to walk off. Alright, talk to you later, Naruto, Annabeth said, waving goodbye. Yeah, see ya, man, Percy said, also waving. Naruto headed off to the Hephaestus cabin's workshop. He had something he thought they might be interested in. As he walked into the workshop, he saw many kids working on many weapons and armor, all in various stages of completion. Hello, who are you? A deep voice from the left of him asked. Naruto turned and saw a huge guy looking at him from one of the workbenches. "I'm Naruto Namikaze, nice to meet you," Naruto said, walking up to him and holding out his hand to him. "Charles Beckendorf, what brings you here?" Charles asked as he shook his hand. "Well, I had this blueprint I made on a two-way low-frequency radio headset that I thought I could get to work for demigods by using celestial bronze as the casing for the machinery," Naruto said, piquing Charles' interest. "Okay, and how does that bring you here?" Charles asked, interested in his answer. "Well, I was hoping I could get the help of Hephaestus's children in making enough for the campers, and we could test it out at Friday's Capture the Flag game. With Chiron telling me whether it broadcasts our location or not, like usual electronic devices do," Naruto said, getting a look of understanding from Charles. "Well, as the head counselor for our cabin, I'll see what I can do. Just leave the blueprints with me and I will get it done," Charles said, grinning while holding his hand out for the blueprints. "I can't wait to see the end result for them. Good luck," Naruto said as he handed over the blueprints and began to leave. Charles was already focused on the blueprints by the time Naruto left. Naruto headed towards the lake after leaving the workshop and saw Percy and Annabeth deep in conversation on the pier and headed their way. "Then who's your dad?" he heard Percy ask once he was in hearing distance of them. Naruto saw Annabeth stiffen at the question and shook his head at Percy sadly. "My dad is a professor at West Point," she said. "I haven't seen him in a long time. He teaches American history." "He's human?" Percy asked, shocked, causing Naruto to shake his head sadly at him again for the way he thought. "What? You assume it has to be a male god who finds a female attractive? How sexist is that?" Annabeth stated, upset. "Yeah, Percy, I thought you already understood the point that goddesses also did this stuff when I told you about the gifts my mom left me, remember?" Naruto said, causing them to turn to him, shocked he was there before Percy nodded to him, remembering that conversation. "Yeah, I remember. So your mom is a goddess?" Percy asked. "Well, my moms are goddesses," Naruto said, shocking them. "What do you mean, moms?" Annabeth asked. "Well, from what Stephanie told me, I know that 3 of the goddesses used some sort of ritual involving theirs and my father's blood to make me," Naruto said, causing Annabeth to nod in understanding. While Percy looked at him confused for a second, before shaking his head and turning to Annabeth. "Well, who's your mom then?" he asked her. "Cabin 6. Annabeth stated. "Meaning?" Percy asked her. Annabeth straightened. "Athena, goddess of wisdom and battle." Percy looked at her skeptically for a second. "And my dad?" he asked her. Undetermined, Annabeth stated. "Like I told you before, no one knows. Except my mom. She knew," Percy said. "Maybe not, Percy. Gods don't always reveal their identities," Annabeth said, looking at him and Naruto. "My dad would have, he loved her," Percy stated, sure of the fact. Annabeth gave Naruto a cautious look and he nodded to her, causing her to sigh. "Maybe you're right, Percy, maybe he'll send a sign." "That's the only way to know. Your father has to send a sign claiming you as his son. Sometimes it happens." "You mean sometimes it doesn't?" Percy asked, shocked. Naruto sighed. "The gods are busy people, Percy. They have lots of kids and they don't always Well, sometimes they don't care about us, Percy, they ignore us, he said sadly. He could see Percy in deep thought for a moment at that. So I'm stuck here, Percy said. That's it, for the rest of my life. It depends, Naruto said. Some demigods can get by with just a few months of training and spend the rest of the time in the mortal world. In their cases, they're just not strong or important enough for most monsters to focus on. But for some of us, it's too dangerous to leave. We're year-rounders. In the mortal world, we attract monsters. They sense us and come to challenge us. Most of the time, they'll ignore us until we're old enough to cause trouble, about 10 or 11 years old. But after that, most demigods either make their way here or get killed off. A few manage to make it in the outside world and become famous. Believe me, if I told you their names, you would know them. Some don't even realize they're demigods. But very, very few are like that. Annabeth told him. About monsters, they can't get in here? Percy asked her. Annabeth shook her head. Not unless they're intentionally stalked in the woods or are summoned by somebody on the inside. Why would anyone want to summon a monster? Percy asked. To use for practice fights or practical jokes, Naruto said with a shrug. What do you mean practical jokes? Percy asked him. Not now, Percy, I'll explain later, Naruto said after receiving a look from Annabeth. The borders are sealed to keep mortals and monsters out. From the outside, a mortal would look in and see nothing unusual but a big strawberry farm, Annabeth told them. So you're a year-rounder? Percy asked Annabeth. Annabeth nodded. From under the collar of her t-shirt she pulled a leather necklace with 5 clay beads of different colors. It was just like others they had seen, except Annabeth's also had a big gold ring strung on it, like a college ring. I've been here since I was 7, she said. Every August, on the last day of the summer session, every camper gets a bead for surviving another year. I've been here longer than most of the counselors, and they're in college. Why did you come so young? Percy asked, causing Naruto to shake his head again and add tact to the list of things Percy needed to learn. Annabeth twisted the ring on her necklace. None of your business, she snapped at him. Percy, Naruto said. You can't question people on their personal life. Annabeth gave him a grateful look, to which he nodded. Oh, sorry, Percy said. He stood there in silence for a moment. So, I could just walk out of here right now if I wanted to? Percy asked her. It would be suicide, but you could, with Mr. D or Chiron's permission. But they wouldn't give permission until the end of the summer session, unless, Annabeth said, trailing off at the end. Unless what? Naruto asked her, though he had a clue as to what it was. You were granted a quest. But that hardly even happens, the last time. Her voice trailed off again. Both Percy and Naruto could tell from her tone that the last time hadn't gone so well. Back in the sick room, Percy said. When you were feeding me that stuff. Ambrosia. Annabeth supplied for him. Yeah, you asked me something about the summer solstice, Percy said. Annabeth's shoulders tensed. So you do know something? Well, no, back at school, me and Naruto overheard Grover and Chiron talking about it. Grover mentioned the summer solstice. He said something about we didn't have much time, because of the deadline. What did that mean? Percy explained, then asked her. Annabeth clenched her fists. I wish I knew. Chiron and the satyrs, they know, but they won't tell me. Something is wrong on Olympus, something pretty major. Last time I was there, everything seemed so normal. You've been to Olympus? Percy asked, shocked. Some of us year-rounders, Luke, Clarisse, and I and a few others, we took a field trip during the winter solstice. That's when the gods have their big annual council, she said. How did you get there? Naruto asked her, intrigued. The Long Island Railroad, of course. You get off at Penn Station. Empire State Building, special elevator to the 600th floor, she explained. She then looked at them like they should have known already. You are a New Yorker, right? She asked them. Oh, sure. Percy said while Naruto rolled his eyes. Right after we visited, Annabeth continued. The weather got weird, as if the gods were fighting. A couple of times since, I've overheard satyrs talking. The best I can figure out is that something important was stolen. And if it isn't returned by the summer solstice, there's going to be trouble. When you two came, I was hoping. I mean, Athena can get along with just about anybody, except for Ares. And of course she's got the rivalry with Poseidon. But, I mean, aside from that, I thought we could work together. I thought you might know something. Percy and Naruto shook their heads. I've got to get a quest, Annabeth muttered to herself. I'm not too young if they would just tell me the problem. Later on, Naruto was back in cabin 11 talking and joking around with the others, while keeping an eye on Percy, who was sitting in a corner looking kinda down. He watched as Luke walked up to Percy with some toiletries and began talking to him. He kept his eyes on them during the entire conversation until he heard a horn blowing in the distance. Cabin 11, fall in. He heard Luke shout. The whole of cabin 11, about 28 kids, filed into the courtyard. They lined up in order of seniority, so of course Percy and Naruto were last in line. Campers came from the other cabins except for the first three, and cabin 8, which had looked normal during the daytime, but was now glowing silver as the sun went down. Naruto's eyes lingered on it for a moment, then moved to cabin 6 and lingered there for a moment too. He had felt some kind of pull to the two cabins, but it was faint, so he brushed it off. They marched off to the dining pavilion. Satyrs, naiads, and nymphs started joining them from different parts of the camp. In all there were about 100 campers, a few dozen satyrs, and a dozen assorted nymphs and naiads. At the pavilion, torches blazed around the marble stone columns. A central fire burned in a bronze brazier the size of a bathtub. Each cabin had its own table, covered in white cloth trimmed in purple. 4 of the tables were empty, but cabin 11's was way overcrowded. Percy and Naruto sat near the edge of the bench. They saw Grover sitting at table 12 with Mr. D, and a couple of plump blonde boys who looked just like Mr. D. Chiron stood to one side, the picnic table being way too small for a centaur. Annabeth sat at table 6 with a bunch of serious-looking athletic kids, all with her gray eyes and honey blonde hair. Clarisse sat at table 5. She'd apparently gotten over being hosed down, because she was laughing and belching right along with the rest of her siblings. Finally, Chiron pounded his hoof upon the marble floor of the pavilion, and everybody fell silent. He raised his glass. To the gods. He bellowed. Everybody else raised their glasses, including Naruto and Percy, and bellowed back. To the gods. Wood nymphs came forward carrying platters of food: grapes, apples, strawberries, cheese, bread, and barbecue. Naruto called out what drink he wanted to his cup and watched it fill up, noticing Percy watch then copy him. Here you go, Percy, Naruto, Luke said, handing them a big platter of barbecue. Both of them then began loading their plates full, with a little of everything on the table. It's time to give our burnt offerings to the gods, Percy, come on, Naruto said. What do you mean burnt offerings? Percy asked him. Naruto just pointed to the brazier and Percy noticed the other campers putting a small portion of their meal into the fire. They got in line behind Luke and watched him make his offering while muttering, Hermes. Naruto was next. Whoever you three are, please claim me soon, Naruto thought as he dropped 2 rolls and some grapes in the fire. As he was lifting his head up, Naruto could have sworn he saw 3 smiling faces in the flames and just smiled back. He then stepped back and waited for Percy to make his offering before heading back to his seat with him. When everybody had returned to their seats and finished eating their meals, Chiron stomped his hoof again for attention. Mr. D got up with a sigh. Yes, I suppose I'd better say hello to all you brats. Well, hello. Our activities director, Chiron, says the next capture the flag is Friday. Cabin 5 presently hold the laurels. A bunch of cheering went up from Cabin 5's table. Personally, Mr. D continued, I could care less, but congratulations. Also, I should tell you that we have 2 new campers today. Perry Wilson - Chiron murmured something to him. Percy Jackson, Mr. D corrected. And Naruto Namikaze. Now run along to your silly campfire. Go on. Everybody cheered. They all headed down toward the amphitheater, where Apollo's cabin let us sing alone. They sang camp songs about gods and ate s'mores, and joked around, and the funny thing was that Percy didn't feel that anyone was staring at him anymore. He felt like he was home. Naruto, I feel like I am home, Percy said, turning to him. Naruto just nodded his head with a smile on his face at that.